Okay, so I just wanted to bring out another video. This is just continue on the CT side. Obviously, we've run through a few setups now. Obviously, most of us know that from the playbooks. The next step would be to look at CT protocols. So just continuing on in this fashion, just to give some of you some things to work on in your own time. Now, if we have a look at the protocols, what I'll do is I'll run through each of these. But for the first segment, I'll just start with positioning and angles. So I've created here I guess a table. I don't know what you would want to call it, but just to run through some of the positioning types, just so that you can kind of break down what each of them are. So you've got CT static positioning, and then you've got a dynamic methodology. So and alongside here we've got a key, obviously different colors for different aggressive types, red being most aggressive, and that being indifferent. So what we'll do is we'll run through each of these just to explain what I mean. Okay, so starting off with the static tree, we'll take a look at a bouncer position first. A bouncer position generally is held by an AWP. It's an aggressive position. Reason being is obviously it's for obvious reasons. It's going to be an AWPer holding this angle. You're just here to take the initial contact, so whether it's something like this or whether it's something like this, before changing up your style again. So a bouncer, just like in a nightclub, you're just there to deny entry onto a bomb site. Okay, so taking a look at the peeker next. Peeker is very different to the bouncer. Obviously you're doing, I think we all know what peeking is. There's different methods of peeking I may come onto in this video later on, but you want to do timely peaks. So if I'm playing this position here, the amount of time it takes for someone to get from here to walk up to around about here. Obviously if you hear them running, you know they're coming fast. But timely peaks, so every 2 seconds, say 1, 2, peak, 1, 2, peak, 1, 2, peak. So if you're playing trigger based, you're playing to a set stimulus, so whether it's to be to a set time, or if you hear steps or your teammates calls, you're using your utility or you're doing an action based off that information. So for instance, if I hear footsteps or if my teammate calls that there's someone there, then obviously I use my utility or I perform a certain action. Or if it's round time, then it might be 1 minute 45 or something, or I don't know, that you use a smoke or something. So if you're playing as a spotter, you may take up an initial aggressive position, so something like this, but you're just spotting for information. You're not necessarily looking for frags, so it's not as if you're going up towards car and you're going out like this. No, that's wrong. You're just spotting. You're playing like an angle like this, so it might be an aggressive angle, but you're spotting. You see someone, may flash off, and you fall back. There are, of course, other ways to go about being a spotter. Obviously, you can do the jump peek, which we'll come on to a bit later in information gathering. But obviously, once you've got your initial information, then you fall back, and that's the definition of a spotter. So obviously, we've got jump peeking as one information gathering, pixel peeking, where you're only showing your shoulder, and then falling back as well. Okay, so looking at the next CT static positioning, hold, sounds pretty self-explanatory, but it's not to be confused with being a bouncer. Being a bouncer, as we've already discussed, is holding an angle and taking your pick there, and you're fighting within that choke point. When you're holding a position, you're not denying the initial execution. So for instance, if the smokes come down at CT and you've got flashes coming over, you're not trying to shut them down in this area. When you're holding the bomb site, you're trying to deny the possession of it, so the possession of the bomb site. So you're just, for instance, a good place here is behind quad, so you're not actually looking down here, you're just denying possession of the bomb site itself, just dancing around these boxes, so that when someone does come in, they're not obviously taking you out at these angles here, making it easy for them. They actually have to go around and clear it, and that's what I mean by holding the bomb site, just dancing around this box. So when we look at CT protocols, now we'll take a look at crossfires and how it applies to the rest of the team and how you play with your teammates. So obviously you want to try and combine some of these together. Obviously the most common one is going to be trigger based and some other form of positioning, and how you play off of each other. So for instance, if I am playing B site with my teammate here at Oranges, and initially I am just spotting, so whether I am spotting at a pixel angle, just like so, or wherever I'm spotting, just in a peeker type style. Then I can drop my smoke, and I can either just hold close and then fall back. Now because the smoke is there, I can play as a bouncer. Like I said, if most of the time I'd say an AWP to play a bouncer position, unless there's a smoke drops. If there's a smoke drop, you've got the advantage, so you can now play a bouncer type position. Obviously when that smoke dissipates, then I can fall back, and I can go into like a trigger based style. So trigger based, based on the fact that when my teammate spots them, then I can use my utility to assist. Now, for the other guy, let's say I'm spotting at CT spawn. Now he's the one playing trigger based to begin with, and as soon as I spot someone, then he can use his flash. He might stay around quickly just here, because it may be that I decide to come through as well. And if there's no one coming through, once I'm rotating around, he just plays as a bouncer style with that smoke down. Obviously when the smoke's about to dissipate, then he might want to fall back towards behind quad. And he wants to just do timely peeks, now he becomes a peeker CT static styled position. So peeker every so often, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And obviously when he does spot someone, that releases the trigger from the guy at coffins, and then you can just play hold. A hold style position behind this quad box. Now if you're playing a retake style position, you're spotting the initial execution, relinquishing map control, and then retaking it from them a moment later. So some setups, like the 131 neutral style setup, is designed for this. So you're spotting initial execution, delaying that execution, relinquishing the map control, and then retaking it with your team later on into the round. This can be done all over the map. It doesn't have to be bomb site specific. It could be that we spot for mid or mid presence, we relinquish that map control, and then we retake it with the rest of the team together in maybe a set routine that we have. So coming towards the end of the static tree, we've got being a ninja. So being a ninja, you're relinquishing map control for stealth, any sort of like element of surprise that you can get. Obviously not every random corner is a ninja spot, so this isn't really a ninja spot. Obviously it can be checked, you can be isolated with Molotovs. You know, if it's a position that can be easily checked or isolated, it's not a good position at all. Generally speaking, a good ninja position is in a high traffic area, so actually on the flowers here. Oops, I can't do it, no clip, so I just pretend I'm on the flowers. So generally, yeah, a good ninja position is going to be in a high traffic area, which is risky to check in the first place, because obviously there's multiple other angles that you're going to be exposed to. So obviously this one's a good one. So as the terrorist comes in here, he's got to check all of these, not necessarily looking up here. Likewise, you've got the one that we do on the pistol setup here, where again, you know, as a terrorist comes through here, rather than checking this, they're exposing the rest of their body to these sort of angles as well. Okay, so just to give you a bit more of an example of how these sort of interlink, we'll just run through the pistol inferno strategy here, and we'll just see how these sort of interlink with each other. So we've got one player in here in the cubby, he's just playing a ninja type style. It's going to maximize the use here as they're coming around to check these corners. We've got one player being the bait here, so it's like a bait and switch type setup, but he's being the peeker. So he's doing 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then he's falling back 1, 2, 1, 2, like so. I've got another player here playing a retake type position. So he's spotting for the initial execution, and he's relinquishing map control and retaking with the rest of the team if it is the A bomb site. The B players, we've got one player here spotting, so whether it's a pixel peek like so, or whether he's peeking out in and out, just spotting. So he's the spotter, takes the initial information, falls back to the site, and then he plays in that hold position from behind quad. Then we've got another player here who's playing trigger based off of that information. So again, this one, just using a flash so he can fall back safely. and another utility around that. Now taking a look at the other tree, the dynamic methodology, we'll start with the rotator position. This does overlap with CT rotations onto the next bit. However, we'll just focus on the CT protocols, and we'll go from there. So the rotator position, obviously this player is going to be more dynamic. So let's say I'm the B player here, and there's presence over towards A. Obviously I might fall back further here, I might smoke it off for my B anchor before coming back. And also I'll still play around here, still being able to support towards B with flash into pool, or barbecue, whatever you want to call it. Or I can just come through here and support my outside player. Now when I do come through here, I need to have a look at my protocols, so how this intertwines with that is, you know, what kind of utility do I throw? Maybe I throw this and this to try and help my library player who's now, or outside player who's now probably falling into library, and I have a crossfire with him. Then I also need to have a look at what kind of angles I'm playing. Am I playing like a peek type angle? Am I playing as a bouncer? Am I just spotting for information? And then holding a more passive angle. So this is something that we need to kind of work out and figure out as time goes on. Okay, so the next two that we're looking at in the dynamic tree is push and rush. So starting with push, you're taking things a little bit more methodically. So you might just try and clear out a couple of these angles, but you're taking it a little bit slower, maybe jump spotting a little bit, maybe get your teammates flashed for you, and you're taking it a little bit slower, just clearing out all your angles carefully and methodically. Now if you're rushing down banana, or any sort of rush at all, obviously you're just going out without a care in the world really. Obviously try and do everything quickly, but you're just going and you're continuing the pace. Obviously this can apply to mid or second mid as well, so obviously your AWP, let's say he's going for a second mid pick. Obviously a push would be something like this, and then he plays into like a bouncer position like this, while his teammate holds his smoke for him. And obviously his teammate can throw a flash or something just so he can fall back in a trigger based style. Okay, so looking at the last one, flanking. Obviously this overlaps with all our other protocols containing and flanking. This is a whole new topic, but just to have a look at the dynamic methodology of this last one. Obviously we can have one player push up into apartments. Obviously you can do this mid round or early round, but let's say you've pushed up, cleared all your angles methodically, and you got yourself into a nice aggressive position like so. So now you're in this position, obviously the containing and flanking comes into place, and this just shows this dynamic side of this methodology. Okay, so now that we understand how each of the static positionings work, what we need to do next is have a look at how they can be most effective. Obviously each of you can split up into groups and say, okay, let's try this one and this one together, or this one and this one together. What I have seen in game at the moment is that maybe two of you are doing the same one. So let's say you're both a bouncer. I know for instance that you do this smoke here, and then we have the AWP sometimes look, well, it's better smoke than that, but have a look into the boiler like this, and then we've got another one on the pallet looking like this. Now I can understand why you do it, because if they smoke off this side, then obviously you're looking over the smoke and you can assist your teammate in mid. However, both of you are playing a bouncer type position. Now if you wanted to fall back from this position, you can't, because you have to jump around the corner and get really fiddly. Likewise, the AWP here can take a shot, but then he has to fall back all the way around here to even evade that. Now good teams or explosive teams, what they'll do is they'll do one explosive flash coming through the middle, and both of you are going to get fucked by just that one flashbang thrown from that guy. So like I said, it's going to be high risk, high reward. I can see why you would do it, but I could also see with just one flashbang will be 2 frags down, and there's more or better setups that we can use or mix together when using this system. So like I said, that's 2 bouncer type positions. Try and mix them up so that you're going to be more effective when holding certain positions. So now that we've had a look at different styles of how to play these positions, we now need to look next at the game mechanics. So we'll have a look at the basics of angles, peaking, we'll have a look at other general things like general body positioning and what the opponents see, and also a bit of information gathering as well. So first thing to note, we'll have a look at the angles first. Before we do that, we just need to know where the camera is. So the camera on any model is going to be in the eyes where the face is. It's 64 units high. Different models are different heights, that's something else to note, and that will depend on which model it is. So on different maps you get different models and also what weapons they have out. So if a bot has a knife out, their head will duck down slightly and sometimes their body is more upright. But the camera still remains at 64 units at that height. Now the other thing to note as well is that you don't necessarily have to see their weapon to be shot, they can shoot from their eyes. So for instance, if we've all played this position here and we only see their head, obviously you get shot regardless if you don't see their weapon or not. Now the next thing to note on angles is a pretty basic one. The further away you are from an angle, the more you see the first. Well, whoever's furthest away from the angle is the one that sees them first. So let's say I am furthest from this angle, I'm going to see them first before he does. However, if I'm up close, he's going to see me before I see him. So for instance, I don't see him here, and if we go third person, obviously I'm sticking out like a sore thumb, but obviously the further I step back, then I'm going to see him before he sees me. Now, also when we approach an angle, we want to do it from 90 degrees, so 90 degrees to the opponent. This means that we want to do 90 degrees from this to this, so like this. So what we don't want to be doing is coming out like this and then having to flick over here. So we always want to try and approach the angle from 90 degrees if we can to peek that opponent. Just a quick diagram thought I'd add in. This just gets demonstrates how this works. Obviously if you're close to the angle, then they're going to see you before you see them. So moving on to peeking, there's a few methods to peek. You've got jiggle peeking, shoulder peeking, wide peeking, crouch peeking, and then there's a couple of common mistakes that people do make is overextension, which is overextending your peeking, and then you've got re-peeking as well, which is another error. So jiggle peeking is when you come out close to a wall, you're just baiting your shoulder out. You don't necessarily look out here because obviously you're going too wide, but you're trying to bait out that shot, and then you might mix it in with a wide peek as well, just to, as soon as they do miss that shot, you come wide, and you can even crouch peek on that on top of that as well. So I'll just show you quickly what I mean. So if we go third person view, so I'm just jiggle peeking, just showing a bit of my shoulder, maybe too much there, just trying to bait out that shot from an AWP or something, and then as soon as that AWP does shoot, I'd wide peek, or I can wide peek and crouch peek. So crouch peek is obviously like this. The reason you'd crouch peek is that people have their crosshair at head height. So most people, when they hold a corner and they see someone jiggle peeking, let's say I'm at this height, right? So a person's jiggle peeking on the corner, and then he crouches, and I have to adjust my crosshair when he wide and crouch peeks. So obviously we've had there are times where you can use wide peeking, there's times where you can use crouch peeking, and there's times to use jiggle peeking. Shoulder peeking is obviously just shouldering out, not overextending it to both players. So you just want to shoulder peek like so, and you do it in little bits. Obviously wide peeking can be useful as well when it comes towards teammates. So let's say I've got a teammate with me. If you've got one here and one here, obviously the first person wants to wide peek and the second person wants to shoulder peek. So if I'm the first guy, I want to swing out wide, and if I'm the second guy, then I want to shoulder peek. And I hold the narrow angle as the shoulder peeker, and the wide one just swings out. And then this guy can clear this and then come wide as well and trade. Now just a bit more on the overextension, which is the overextending peeking and re-peeking. Obviously when you overextend, you're swinging out past this corner and you've got multiple engagements. What you want to try and do is limit this to one engagement at a time, and this is quite important. So you want to try and do one person and then two persons if you can, and you want to try and get them on one-on-one, one-on-one. Try and break these engagements up rather than fighting them both together. So that's a really big or common problem that you will see. So and then the other option or problem that people do is re-peeking. So that's when they peek this corner, then they peek again, then they peek again, and again, and again. And this guy, all he has to do is just wait for him to peek again and shoot him in the face. So rather than re-peeking, try and just, if you do peek, then reposition. And if you're in a crossfire setup or whatever, then you have someone else to take, be the bait. So if it's like a bait and switch setup, maybe you've got, going back to that system again, having one playing trigger based and one peeking, you have one flash come in through, and the other guy just then peek off that, rather than re-peeking over and over in that situation. Okay, so the next one to talk about is shadows. Just quickly explain that. So obviously if you look down at your feet, you can't see your own shadow. Obviously shadows come from the light source here. Now obviously we know that the light shadow is coming through here. This is quite a common one. So obviously it does give you information as to where they're coming from. You can see them before they get through the door. But obviously you do have to be aware about it because you can't see your own shadow. You need to be aware about it on other maps, and I'll give you an example of one now. So the example I've got here is if we're on the right side of this bomb train, obviously you can see your shadow down here on the floor. However, it's not until you get to the middle of this bomb train that your shadow isn't visible from lower. So obviously if you're at top lower, you can see the shadow here, and it just gives away your position. However, if you're on the middle of the train or on the left side of the train, it's not going to be visible. Now the other thing to note is that obviously with your positioning, we just need to have a look at that as well. So obviously if I mean this is a bit of a weird angle, right, but hypothetically if I'm on top of the box here, I should be playing at the back of this object. And the reason I want to do that rather than play at the front is that if I play from the back or from the side of this object, then I can take the first shot and then fall back easily and reposition. Whereas if I'm on the front of this object, then I have to run back this way, or I drop off in front into them. So if I run back this way, then it gives me a couple more seconds where it's going to be dangerous for me on top of this object, and I have to fall back, or it's a lot slower to fall back from. Whereas if I'm on the back of the object already, then I can just drop and roll. Now the other thing to note as well is how you position yourself and what your opponent can see. So obviously you can see here that if you're positioned at the front of the box, you're a much bigger target and easier to shoot. And if you're positioned at the back of the top box, obviously they're facing the wrong way, but you're a smaller target to hit than this one. Now the other thing I didn't even realise when I came around here, obviously there is a window where they can't see you, but even so, you know, that's also something to consider as well when you look at your own positioning in different positions. So just thought I'd want to bring that up. Now continue with body positioning and about what engagements you should take. I've chosen the default boxes here. This sort of overlaps with the whole peeking and the angles that you should take, what kind of peeking you should be doing, overextending and that kind of thing. So it all comes into play on what engagements you should be taking and how you should be doing it. So if I'm around this default box, obviously we have to figure out what angles that we can do, and obviously you can apply this to your own protocols. So obviously the angles around here, you've got one over here, one up there, one that comes in close. So you do have to be worried about the ones that run down this side, and obviously anyone from Palace. So now we need to kind of like isolate these engagements and figure out what's the best way to do this. Now obviously you've got utility and your teammates and your, how you use it in setups and that kind of thing. Me personally, I'd probably choose this one last, because obviously if you pick this one first and you swing out wide, that's an overextension. So obviously you've got so many angles here that you have to clear that anyone could be at, and even someone in Palace. So you need to figure out how to take these duels one by one. Maybe you take the first contact around here, and going from the previous example of positioning yourself on the back of the box, maybe you come back here, take your first shot, drop, try and isolate that second one, maybe just hold like an off angle, and then come around this way. So not actually over facing or overextending here, maybe get a flash in before then peeking around or whatever. But yes, maybe something we need to figure out for different spots. Okay, so I just wanted to do one more example of this before moving on. This just sort of brings in all the sort of peaking and angles and everything, and brings it all together, and sort of helps with your CT positioning as well by knowing how the other enemy team is going to be reacting. So normally the AWP is going to be playing on the arch side, and most of the time he will find himself back at Moto round mid to late round. Now, as we mentioned before, it's quite common to see a jiggle peek here, usually to try and bait out the AWP from the CT side, and then he'll wide swing. And as the AWPer, it's kind of difficult to know like whether to hold a tight angle or an angle just off the wall. So it's difficult to do that. What it's better to do sometimes is just hold an off angle. So an off angle like this. So if you look at it from the T's perspective, what the T is going to have to do is he'll have to come around this corner, he'll shoulder peek this, he'll jiggle peek this, and then what he's going to have to do is he's going to have to make a decision of whether to clear this area where he's got his back turned to you, or whether he's going to swing wide on you like this. But either way, he's going at one pace, like he can't jiggle here. So holding an off angle might be quite nice to do there. Now also, like I said before, it's not good to kind of play close, but obviously when you approach this angle you want to just either jiggle peek or shoulder peek this angle, and you want to cut the pie like you would normally, so that you're trying to get one engagement at a time, not coming wide like this, exposing yourself to multiple angles. So you want to do one at a time. My aim wasn't so bad. Just so that you can break them up into 1v1 engagements. So lastly on here we'll have a look at the information gathering. So as we mentioned earlier, just going back to the start of this video about being a spotter, obviously sometimes you want to pixel peek and sometimes you want to say just do like a normal peek, timely peek. Now you need to know when or which is best to do on what angle. So a pixel peek like this, obviously they'll see just part of your shoulder, but you'll be able to see them, and then you can just move quickly out of the way. And the reason you want to do a pixel peek at this angle rather than a ordinary peek is that sometimes you'll do an ordinary peek, but there'll be like a window or a time window where they've crossed without you realizing that they're here. So the reason you do a pixel peek is just to prevent that from happening. So you get that information there, and then you can react off of it. Okay, so lastly we'll just have a quick look at the jump spotting for information gathering. It happens across all maps. I think I've done this before, but I'll just explain once again. Obviously when you're jump spotting left and right, I've seen examples where you're jump spotting like this, and obviously you're a big target when you should be jump spotting like this. Now, I've made a couple of graphs that I can just show you and explain why and what I'm doing if you can't see what's happening. So here we've got jump peaking, so the origin of our jump starts from here. Obviously we've got the velocity and the peak of our jump, so the highest point where we are is here, and then obviously gravity brings us back down and our jump is finished and we reach Earth again. So obviously the height and the distance are represented here. So if we have a look in this one, obviously taking the same concept, we've got the origin of the jump, we've got the height of the jump, and we've got the termination of the jump, and this is the ticket box, and this is the box next to ticket. Now what we want to do is try and gather the information here in this little circle, so we're going to be the smallest possible target that we can be. So if we look at this in third person, just so you can see what I'm talking about. So if you come across here, obviously I'm a difficult target to hit because you don't really see me that often. Now if I see him jumping left and right like this, then you're going to see me all the time, or if I jump up in a straight line like this, obviously I'm going to be an easier target to hit. So you want to jump up into cover so you're still getting the information. Now obviously for this specific example, we do this on the 131 retake option. I've just put this back into first person. So we do this on the 131 retake thing, so obviously you're jump spotting for ramp, and you can usually peek, say from ramp here, but you can still peek palace here, so you're jumping up, spotting, jumping up, spotting. But you're using, if you imagine that circle, that window of information just around here, just using this little window to spot people. So just to summarise this video, we'll come to the end now because obviously it's become quite long. There's a couple of things I've missed off, but obviously you can have a look at those, but I think this gives you enough to sort of play around with. Obviously we've had a look at positioning and angles, majority of this video, obviously different styles that you hold. Look at your own demos, think, was this the best angle? Could you try something else? Is there any other positions that you can try? We've had a look at information gathering, best ways to do that. We've had a look at rotations briefly. I'll probably do that in another episode perhaps. Just go into it a bit more detail, but you've got more of a supportive element there, so you need to look at your counter utility, how you're rotating into a bomb site, where you're rotating into a bomb site, routes at the beginning of the round, how your teammates are playing off of you, how you're playing off of one another. Are you playing like a trigger based style, is one of you peeking, one of you holding, that kind of information. Obviously we didn't even have a look at what common scenarios that are being played, but obviously the more and more you play it, you have a look at your style that you're playing, how you're going to react off of that situation. You have a look at the common scenarios that will occur, A splits, executes, fast pushes, anything like that. Obviously when you're playing with low HP, you want to try and put yourself into a headshot position where they can only see your head, regardless of how, you know, if you've got 100 HP or 1 HP, if they only see your head, it's going to have to be a headshot. So try and put yourself into a headshot angle if you've got low HP. If you've got a worse weapon, try and use those one and done positions, ninja spots we were talking about with the different styles. If you've got no utility, do a similar sort of thing. Player advantage, disadvantage, that's where you come into you know, whether you need to play more passive or more aggressive. But again, that's for another time when we come on to those episodes. But for CT protocols, like I said before, just have a quick look at your own demos and have a look at what things you can take away from this video and how you can apply it to your own game.